Okay, thank you, Helmut. I'm just going to ask, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share a little bit about my story. Again, I don't see myself as an academic. I believe I'm, again, a person who came into a profession as a paramedic in mining, and then I grew into roles, very practical. So I'm going to share some of my learnings, and you may agree with some of my theories, and maybe you won't agree with some of my theories, but I think it'll make for good discussion after my presentation. Again, about my organization, Workplace Safety North. We are a provincial health and safety association here in Canada, the province of Ontario, and our organization has been around for more than 100 years. Workplace Safety North also administers the Ontario Mine Rescue Program, which many are familiar with. We have definitely a strong following of our Ontario Mine Rescue Program, and our vision is every worker home safe and healthy. And this is our building here in Sudbury, and I'm sitting up in the office right now in the top left corner, sharing with you this morning, or my morning, I guess probably evening for many of you on this call. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you a little bit what I've learned about management systems, culture, climate assessment and audit tool, people, and one very important thing. Before we go too far into my presentation, I mentioned earlier that I was a paramedic and then I was hired on by a mining company, and I was intrigued about mining, so I transferred to the underground department. One of the things that were permitted at that time, it is no longer today, was that we could get into a loader. So you can see here, we call them scoop trams here in Canada, and we could get in the bucket and we can do work above the ground. The one requirement is that you had to be tied off, and you could see the lanyard here that you used to tie off to make sure you didn't fall out of the bucket. On my first time being given a task with work above me, I was assigned to work with a seasoned worker, and that employee was the operator of the scoop, and I got into the scoop tram, and he raised me off the ground. I was probably about 9 feet off the ground to fix some ventilation piping. I asked the question when I show this slide, was I tied off or not? And the reason I ask is because the consequences, if I fell, were pretty catastrophic for me at that level of 9 feet. And the answer was I was not tied off. And that's kind of confusing, because at that time I was also taking health and safety courses. So when we look at some of the books I've read about leadership and behavior, is we always behave towards our values. At that time that I was standing in the bucket, I valued my kids. They were very young at the time. They were very important to me then as they are today. I valued my partnership with my spouse, very important to me. I valued my career. I had aspirations, things I wanted to do in life. I valued my sense with the community. I've always been involved in youth sports and other parts of the community. It was very important to me the time I spent doing that. So why would a person who is aspiring to become a health and safety professional, who values their family, their spouse, their career, their involvement with the community, knowing that if they fell out of the bucket, could be crippled, it could be worse, could be a fatal injury, not tie off? And that's a tough question. Often the answers I receive is probably I wasn't trained. Maybe there was no lanyard available. Perhaps, my partner, gave me false information. But none of that is true. I knew I was supposed to be tied off. The lanyard was available. And my reasons for not is I was new underground. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to belong. And when I saw other people working out of the bucket, they didn't tie off. My partner didn't ask me to tie off or force me to tie off. And that's just to show how powerful workplace culture is. It takes what we believe are givens, like you will behave towards your values. And I've shared with you what's most important to me, my values, yet here I was in the scoop bucket, not tied off, putting everything at risk. I think it's important that we highlight that at the beginning of this presentation. Next in my journey, after I worked underground for a few years, I moved into a health and safety role at a small mine called Podolsky. It's no longer in operation. And I was new to health and safety, but the operation had significant issues, a lot of injuries and incidents. They had poor housekeeping. And I was fairly new to health and safety, but I was very aggressive. And I worked with the new management team there. They replaced most of the leadership. And we improved housekeeping. We tightened policies and procedures. We did the training that was required. We looked to involve the workers into some of the things we did, and very quickly we saw a turnaround. Even the mines inspector that came to the site was very impressed with how quickly we had addressed many of the conditions. Within a very short time, we stopped having incidents and injuries. So it was very positive. I was very pleased about that. With only months in as a health safety professional, I was actually promoted. I think that the management was very impressed with the approach, the logic of how we structured health and safety, and they wanted to see more of that at other projects. So I moved to the central office. Only a couple of months into my new position, I got a call from the engineer at the mine. And he said, "You need to come to the mine right now." And I knew something was very wrong. And I left and I came to the mine site. And when I arrived, it became quickly probably the worst day of my life. When I came to what they call the head frame, I saw grown men crying. I saw some blood on the ground, and I saw the paramedics leaving the site with their lights and siren. It became evident to me something really bad had happened, and I was informed that the person involved in the incident had died. I knew the person. I knew that he had a wife and kids. I knew that he enjoyed the outdoors. I knew he cared very much about the people he worked with. After all of our efforts to make that workplace safer and better, it seemed to do nothing for me. I was just so disappointed to this day that we didn't do more to protect this employee from that. And I told myself, this will never happen again. We will do better. After the incident, the organization I was with hired a vice president of health and safety. They didn't want a repeat of this ever again. And this gentleman believed in management systems, and he introduced me to the world of management systems. And at the time, OHSAS 18001 was the standard that most were gravitating to. We convinced our senior leadership team that we should certify to OHSAS 18001. We hired a consultant to assist us. We put in all of the elements. We worked at making sure the documentation was in place. We did an internal audit, and then eventually came the external audit, probably about 6 months into that journey. And we passed, and we were putting the certificates on the wall. We now had OHSAS 18001. I was very proud that we were the first mining contractor in North America to certify to OHSAS 18001. Only about 4 or 5 months after we were certified that I realized that this was a beast, and the beast needed to be fed. We had to continue to have paper and time, and it took a lot of commitment. And with the size of our organization and the resources available, we were struggling to keep feeding the beast to maintain certification. And at some point, I had to talk to my boss at the time, the VP, and some managers, say, I think that we should stop trying to keep certification. It was taking time off the floor and introducing new risk. I'm not against management systems, but I believe that our motivation was to get a certificate on the wall, not necessarily reduce risk in our workplace and make the workplace safer. We believe that would be an outcome, but I wasn't sold that it was an outcome. And if anything, I felt we were actually increasing the risk by applying all of our time and resources to feed the management system. Other things happened in my career that challenged my belief in things like ISO standards. And I'm not against ISO standards, but again, the motivation of an organization to go down that path is what I challenge. We had at one site, which I'll talk about in a moment, ground support wouldn't install like it was supposed to. There was flaws in them. And we kept working with the organization that would manufacture these. And they kept saying, don't worry, we're ISO 9001. We have a quality control system in place. Until one day, we had a serious injury, a lost time injury. An employee was seriously injured because of a defective equipment. I was incredibly upset and frustrated. And I brought a small audit team to their manufacturing plant a few days later. And we were going to audit their ISO 9001. What we found at that plant is there were a lot of great workers, great people. There was no quality management system in place. There was a binder. They had assigned a person probably only a few days before to be their quality person, but the persons on the floor did not understand all the complexities of the management system. All things like calibration tools weren't being calibrated, non-conformances were not being actioned on. There was no true quality management system. I saw this to be true in other incidents as well. There was a work platform I was involved in an investigation, the exact same thing. We went to the plant, we did not see evidence of a true quality management system. Another hose fitting incident, we went to that plant, we also saw the same thing. The motivation for these manufacturing plants to get ISO was they needed to be able to do work with some of the bigger companies. The bigger companies never went and audited to find out if there truly was. They simply accepted that there was a certificate and that was acceptable. Another experience I had is when touring surface plant at another company, not in Canada, as a tour, being provided with a tour, I was very appreciative. But I did notice a significant health hazard in one of the plants, and when I discussed it with those giving the tour, the manager brought me to a wall, and he said, "Look, you don't have to worry about it. We're ISO 45001. The management system has this." And that again further supported my belief that sometimes what we think is a great initiative like certification to a management system may not be accomplishing what we had hoped for. And without naming companies, if you step back and look at some of the largest catastrophic events in mining specifically in the world, some of these companies really relied on their management system to be taking care of things. So again, I'm not adverse to management system, but they need to be proportional to the size of the organization. The motivation for them should be about reducing risk in the workplace, not a certificate up on a wall. After these experiences, I knew that I had to spend more time thinking about other things that influence health and safety in the workplace. And that became obvious on my experience and self-reflection of my behaviors in the workplace as a miner was culture. And culture is often what people consider as what really happens in a workplace. You can have the policies, the procedures, you can have the rules, but what is really done in the workplace on a Saturday night shift when nobody's looking? So I spent time, and I was very fortunate to cross paths with some new leadership that really believed in culture. And they were on the other spectrum that it's only and all about culture. One of my stories I like to share is the McCready West Mine. So this new leadership comes in, we're invested in culture. I was still believing in some of the principles of management systems. But in 2008, the world changed, the markets dropped, base metal prices dropped. And this small operation, which is the mine that had built the company I was working with at the time, was going to be cut in half as far as the workforce. We were going to be left with about 120 workers. And the reason to keep this operation going was really about retaining some of the talent, because in the conditions, we weren't going to make a lot of money. This change in the organizational structure happened in December of 2008. Between January and March of 2009, we had a number of incidents, a couple of serious injuries, and one almost potential fatal incident. And this just didn't make any sense at the time, a small workforce with so many incident injuries. And the manager brought the whole crew in. He was a very caring person, and he sat with the workers, and he was honest with them. He said, "I can't operate a mine that's not really going to make any money. That's just going to hurt people. That's just not logical. And I don't know what to do. I care about you. I want to keep you working. But whatever we're doing isn't working." And from there on, things changed, and the workforce started to take ownership, and they started to talk about what they could do. And the energy grew in the room. And then we had a second meeting with the other crew, and the same thing happened. And the workforce developed their own principles, what they would do to make sure that they could work safely. This was by them. All I did at the time was record what their commitments were. We made posters. But even without the posters, we start to see evidence of this in the mine operation really fast. We saw some positive graffiti in the underground. We saw housekeeping efforts improve significantly without the push by management. And even the contractors working at our site bought into this. Everybody worked together to try and make the operation safe because we had to, and they wanted to. That operation had gone well over a year without any incident at all, not even a first aid injury. And many challenged me on the integrity of that. I was there every day. I'm an integral person. Also, the KPIs showed that this to be true. Production was way up. Maintenance costs were way down. We had no health and safety incidents, but we also had almost no absenteeism. Everybody was at work and healthy, and all the other metrics followed. So a strong business case to be made on health and safety. Now, why did we lose that record? If you remember back to my speaking about the ground control support that failed us, when it failed, it caused a lost time injury. So again, a lot of frustration by the workforce that they had done their part, yet something outside of their control, their influence, caused them to be injured. This had me reflect on, if systems are important and culture is important, why aren't we looking at both? 360 view, kind of the ecosystem of health and safety. When I came to Workplace Safety North, we developed a culture system audit. It's in Ontario, we had a group that worked because of the mines review, because the number of fatalities, traumatic fatalities in 2014, look at all things. And one of them was to look at the internal responsibility system, how each workplace party contributed to the health safety in an organization. We did an audit at six Ontario mining operations. More than 2,000 persons were involved. And out of that, we sent all of the data to the Institute for Work and Health, who study the data. And they contacted me and said that the audit, which looked at systems and culture, had a direct correlation with the lagging indicator. The system score, the audit score, directly correlated to the bad things happening. This was really, truly now what we call a predictive indicator, a leading indicator. We also noted that when we overlapped the maturity of the system to the maturity of the culture, we could identify system gaps that could be filled. So if an organization was looking on their continuous improvement plan, we could show them where the system is weak, but the culture is supporting it. But if you don't put in the system controls, at some point that culture may not continue to support it. Again, the most important part here is that the CAT perception survey scores were strongly correlated with the incidence of work-related injury and illness, 100% of the time. I could go on and on a lot more about the CAT audit, what we determined, but I don't have time in this presentation today. In my journey, this is also when I continue to reflect about people. People implement the management systems, people do the work. There are people who give directions, there are people who set the expectations. And again, I challenge organizations on the way we perceive this. This is a typical management hierarchy. We have the employees at the bottom of the pyramid, their supervisor on top of them, the middle managers, all the way up to the CEO and the board of directors. And my challenge on the thinking is, if you're looking at a hierarchy to support cultural transformation, it has to happen at the board of directors, then the CEO, and all the way up to the workforce. And we need to look and think about things differently. If you want an organization to support that cultural transformation, you need a culture-based management system. You need to integrate the employee involvement into the workplace in all aspects. And for that, the board needs to select a CEO that truly wants to see this as part of the organizational culture, that health and safety is important to them. And then that's translated to the behaviors of the vice presidents and to the managers, middle managers, all the way to the frontline employees. And almost as important, possibly more important, is that there's an opportunity for input both directions. It's not just from the CEO all the way up to the frontline employees, but there's an opportunity for the employees to see themselves in this and be able to share information that goes up through the supervisors all the way back to the CEO. We kind of call that the plan, do, check, act, right? The continuous improvement circuit, but integrating that into organizational structure. And that one very important thing I mentioned earlier, sustainable occupational health safety innovations. When we look at occupational health and safety, we're talking, when we talk about involvement of workers, it's not just communication, it's not just participation, it's beyond participation, and we're looking at employee engagement. And that has to be by design. It's not once in a while we involve and engage our employees. It really is into all of the things in our system, whether it's the identification of hazards, the assessment of risk, the control, that we bring in that employee engagement. And when we talk about the employee engagement, when we look at things like the risk assessment, which to me is foundational to any management system, it's about not just talk about rules anymore. Rules are really controls. They're things we identify that need to be done or have some level of risk mitigation. And perhaps we need to evolve to calling them controls rather than rules. And again, if the employees are involved in identifying the risk, assessing the risk, and also, most importantly, helping contribute to what those controls are, we tend to see that employee engagement helps those buy into the plan and conform to those controls. One study showed the engagement effect on KPIs. So again, an organization that had high engagement with their employees showed higher profitability, sales, and productivity and customer metrics, but they saw far less quality, client safety, employee safety incidents, and also had high impact on turnover. So I've said a lot in a very short time, and I know there may be an opportunity for some questions for me to answer based on what I've shared. Yesterday, I listened to Jose's presentation in the morning, and he said, we have to not just be there, but we have to walk the talk. And that leadership, that's the portion where employees see the leaders engaged and involved in their workplace, I can't say enough about that. For workforce to believe that their leadership cares about them, they're in their workplace and they're setting expectations and ensuring those expectations are met goes a long way in my experience. That's my share for this morning, and I'll take my last couple of minutes to hear from any questions or thoughts from you. Thank you.